There are people who had positive experiences with homeschooling. I am not one of those people, but for a really long time, I thought that I was. My name is Rita, and I was homeschooled from kindergarten all the way through high school. I used to think that I was proof that homeschooling worked, that it was good for kids, good for families, and good for society. When people asked me why I had been homeschooled, why my parents chose that, my answer usually started with, why not? I honestly could not think of any reason not to homeschool. I thought that anyone could do it. And I thought that everyone, or practically everyone, should do it. At the same time, I was opposed to any regulation of homeschooling. I thought everything should be left completely to the parents, with literally no oversight from the school district, from the state, from anyone. Even into my 20s and 30s, I was talking about how wonderful homeschooling was and how glad I was that I had been homeschooled. But when I look back on my childhood now, in my early 40s, I see it very differently. Now I see indoctrination, isolation, and even neglect. And all of that connects directly to homeschooling, at least to homeschooling the way that I experienced it and the way that a lot of children are still experiencing it. Over time, homeschooling became central to my family's identity. And homeschooling brought a lot of other things with it. Things like a destructive, extreme form of religion, things like purity culture, and things like Christian nationalism. So my family had gone to church before we started homeschooling. But back then, religion wasn't an all-consuming part of our lives. When I was 10 or 11, though, we started going to an evangelical church that was homeschool friendly, where the pastor and his wife homeschooled their kids, and where more and more homeschooled families started to join over the years. By the time I was grown up, I think it was mostly homeschool families there. And the teachings at this church became more and more Calvinist. So I was learning that I was a sinful worm with nothing good in me. And then sexual purity was very important in the evangelical homeschool subculture that we found ourselves in. My virginity was the greatest gift I could give my future husband. And just saying that really grosses me out now, but I believed it. I decided that I wanted my first kiss to be on my wedding day. And I thought that flirting with a boy or having a secret crush on a boy was sinful. So I saw myself as a worm, and I was desperately trying to suppress any hint of my sexuality. And that created a lot of pressure. And this pressure was added to by the Christian nationalism that was promoted in some of the school books that we used, and by a lot of big Christian homeschool personalities and speakers who we listened to. I was raised as a soldier for Christ. I accepted this role, and I accepted my responsibility to reclaim America for Christ, to build this Christian society. And on top of all of that was my dysfunctional family. Now, I'm not trying to blame having a dysfunctional family on homeschooling. Like, I would have had this family even without the homeschooling, and of course I know that. But homeschooling magnified the dysfunction. I could not get away from it because I was always there. I was always at home. I was always with my family. And I couldn't know what was normal and what wasn't normal because my only real frame of reference was what was happening in my home. Being homeschooled also meant that I grew up in an echo chamber. And this echo chamber was full of really absurd, often very damaging teachings about things like science, history, psychology, politics, economics, human nature in general. I mean, you name it. For biology, I spent a lot of time learning arguments against evolution and in favor of a 6,000-year-old Earth. And I know that that isn't exactly uncommon in the US, but that's just the starting point. So one of the books that I read for history credit, which is right here, talked about the Salem witch trials and said that the Salem witch trials took place in response to, I quote, supernatural manifestations of Satan's power, occultism, witchcraft, poltergeist phenomena. Another one of my school books taught me that psychology was pretty much bunk because it wasn't founded on biblical principles, and that many, if not most, mental illnesses could be cured, completely resolved, if the person would just turn to God and repent of their sins. And it's important to understand that these were the only viewpoints I was given the chance to consider. This stuff was taught to me as absolute truth, and it was reinforced everywhere I turned. So a great deal of my education really was nothing but indoctrination. And I'm really sad to say that it worked very well. I believed these things wholeheartedly, and I believed them for a very long time. But I don't believe them anymore. Now I'm a homeschool heretic. I don't have kids, but if I did, I would not homeschool them. Not to mention that I live in Germany now and homeschooling is illegal here, but that's another story. I'm an atheist. I live with my partner and we're not married. I've rejected practically everything I learned and believed for the first 30 plus years of my life. And that's not easy to do. So I've done a lot of therapy, and I've spent a lot of time rebuilding my life, figuring out what my values are, instead of just taking them from a book or an authority figure. In future videos, I'm planning on delving into what homeschooling actually looked like for me, how it worked, what I did, and I also want to go through some of the school books I used. I want to talk about things like religion and purity culture, how they affected me, and some of the ways that I've found to at least begin to heal from them. And it's very important to me personally to talk about the homeschool political lobby, which you might not have even known exists, but there is a homeschool political lobby, and it is very active and very powerful. It's been working since I was a child to pretty much gut public education and to give parents more and more control over their children, with no safeguards in place to protect these children from abuse or to even ensure that they're getting any kind of education. So if you were homeschooled, or if you're currently being homeschooled, I hope that my videos can help you feel a little less alone. If you're a homeschooling parent, or if you're a parent who's thinking about homeschooling, I hope that my videos will help you to look at home education from a different perspective. And if you're someone without any personal connection to homeschooling who somehow is here watching my videos, I hope I can give you some insight into a subculture that you might otherwise not know anything about. And I hope that I can show you how the homeschooling movement is impacting the US and other countries as well right now in very big ways, because it's important to pay attention to this. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.